What's up? I am El Phantasmo, the British J Cup winner 2018, and you are watching Wrestling with Regret.
Hey everyone, Brian Zane here. I am at the Wrestling Media Con in Manchester, England. I'm joined for the first time ever in this channel by Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic.com.
You went for Tweddell?
I went for Tweddell. I was 50-50 odds. I was going to get it right or somewhere in the ballpark. But he's here today to talk with me about a very important topic near and dear to his heart, because you know a little something about royalty.
Oh, I wrote the book on it.
And kings and queens and that sort of thing. So we're just going to have a bit of a chat about a brief history of wrestling gimmicks that are surrounding or about royalty in wrestling. We've seen this just for as long as we've been wrestling fans. There have been kings and queens and princes and all sorts of regality. Right now, it seems that WWE has a whole bunch of royalty hanging out in their midst. They've got the Queen of Wrestling, there's Charlotte.
Princess.
Yeah, there's the Princess of Staten Island.
King of Strong Style.
Strong Style, and we had the King of the Cruiserweights and Neville before that. What is the deal with all of this emphasis on royalty? I mean, I know in America we have a big obsession with the royal
You
family.
do, don't you?
It's
that doesn't translate over here.
It's disgusting. I don't understand the appeal. But we've got this whole obsession with royalty in our wrestling as well. What do you think that is? Do you think that's related to the royal obsession, or is it laziness? Like, what's your take on that?
My mind goes straight to laziness. I think gimmicks like kings and queens and stuff is the height of laziness in wrestling. In 2018, they had their time back in the day, but they've been done to death by now. But I also think that Vince McMahon just must be a massive fan of the royal family. He must be one of those Americans. Like, how many cups do you have with the Queen's face on?
Actually, you know what? When I was remodeling my kitchen once, I took out an old cabinet and found an old, swear to God, a mug with the royal family of Charles and Diana and their boys on it. It was fascinating.
I think Diana's a bit different, but for the rest of the royal family, that just doesn't translate over here at all.
Over the years, there's been plenty of examples of good uses of kings in wrestling. Jerry the King Lawler immediately comes to mind. King Booker is a more modern take on that. It's something that when I was first watching, I thought I got kind of sick of, but then when you look back at it in retrospect, it's actually one of the more brilliant things Booker T did was the king. And then King Kurt, when Kurt Angle won the King of the Ring in 1999, or was it 2000? 2000, he debuted in 99. But when he did the King Kurt thing, he did it with this kind of innocence about him, where he's like, I'm a king, and he's got the robe, and he's got the crown and the scepter, and that was wonderfully done. But let's just look back at some of the more historic examples of this. Let's talk about, King Harley Race. When he came to the WWF in the 80s, he won a King of the Ring tournament. This is before it became an annual thing and before it became a pay-per-view. But he won the King of the Ring tournament, and he adopted King Harley Race as his gimmick. And that to me struck me as odd, because someone with the history of Harley Race then, he comes in WWF and he's built as this fresh-faced newcomer despite being a multiple-time NWA champion at the time. What were your thoughts when you saw Harley Race slapped in the purple, the cape and the crown and all?
Exactly what you just said there. I thought it was another case of Dusty Rhodes, but before Dusty Rhodes happened.
Yeah, it's true.
Someone who's built their name and their lineage in wrestling history outside of WWE, Vince McMahon going, ha! That doesn't matter, damn it! And then just going, let's dress you as a king, haha, look at you. Apparently Vince sold the idea to Harley in that a king was more prestigious than a world champion. So a king looks down on a world champion. Which I think is stupid if you believe that.
I think that the true slap in the face would have been if they changed his name as well. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it would have been better or worse keeping his name or changing his name and being the king as well. Might have been more of a slap in the face, but if you're going to do the thing where you totally adopt this king gimmick, which is the antithesis of everything you've represented beforehand, you might as well change the name as well. I mean, I don't know what to think about that, but then from King Harley Race came King Haku. When Harley Race got injured, Haku kind of took his place. Bobby Heenan gave him the King mantle, and he carried it for a while until he and Race had a feud for a bit in '89. Now, I'm not going to disparage the good name of Haku. I don't know if he's watching.
He would kill you if you did.
He probably would, but I think that Haku, as a tough man in wrestling and one of the biggest badasses in wrestling, is not disputed, is not contested. I'm not going to challenge that. But do you think Haku needed to be a king to get over?
I think it was funny, wasn't it? Seeing a big, because apparently there's two men that Andre the Giant is legitimately scared of. One of them's Harley Race and one of them is Haku. And for good reason. And seeing a man like that dressed up like that, it's just funny, isn't it? It's juxtaposition. It shouldn't be together, but it is.
Do you wonder if that's just kind of like Vince doing
It's
Andres
definitely him.
Solid, where it's like, hey pal, if you're scared of these guys, it's kind of like confronting your fears and they go away, or you take the power away from them.
Yeah.
Like, let's take the power away from Harley Race and Haku by giving them king gimmicks. It is almost a kind of a way of, it's silly almost. It's almost a comedy thing for Haku, I should say, to have the king gimmick. But like, boy, that's kind of a weird character, a weird wrestler to give a comedy gimmick to, don't you?
They got a WrestleMania match out of it, to be fair.
They did. They had,
I think the loser had to, was it bow to the winner?
That was Harley and Junkyard Dog at
Beg my pardon.
WrestleMania 3.
Was it just the gimmick on the line then? Or the king status?
It was literally, yeah, it was like if Junkyard Dog won, he'd become the king, but if he lost, he would bow. And then when they did it, it was like, it was the most roundabout way to try and save face for Junkyard Dog ever, where he does a nanosecond of a bow, and then he just jumps Harley, hits him with a chair afterward, and he takes the crown anyway and poses with it. Like, that's literally all it was. Probably the most infamous example of a king in the WWF after King's Race and Haku.
Nobody quite as American as you, sir.
Was that of King Mabel. In 1995, he won the King of the Ring tournament, and probably throughout the history of the tournament and its winners, I would almost venture the most out of place King of the Ring winner, at least when you look back in hindsight and looking back at all the previous winners and what they accomplished afterward. I think there's like a bottom tier, and Mabel's probably at the bottom of it, if not at the bottom.
I think it's just symptomatic of 1995 as a whole, wasn't it? Mabel is the king, Mabel in the main event of SummerSlam, while Taker and Michaels are in the mid-card.
Yeah.
Do you know why? What was the reason for Mabel being just existed?
I guess they wanted to preemptively make sure he wasn't the third man in the NWO.
I mean, all you hear about the guy is the fact that he just injured people.
Yeah, he was...
During this time, I should say.
Yeah, and it was an issue where he's not, it's like he was traditionally a good worker, but he had some, bad luck. And that happens in wrestling where wrestlers will maybe hurt themselves here, hurt somebody else in another match, and like they gain a reputation. And whether that's warranted or not is up for debate, but that was the stigma that Mabel had around that time when right around the time he got that push, because he broke Taker's face with the leg drop, and that's where he got that Phantom of the Opera mask as well. But yeah, it was just a weird thing because he was given a main event match with Diesel at SummerSlam 95 for the championship, and that was really, I think, probably his biggest push. And then, unless you count years later when he would come back as Viscera, he had a bit of an interesting run there. And
World's largest love machine.
World's largest love machine. I would almost say that was probably a better gimmick for him than King Mabel.
Oh, absolutely.
More memorable.
I thought he nailed that.
Yeah,
especially with Lillian Garcia.
Emphasis on the word nailed. And then he became Big Daddy V in ECW, where I believe he challenged for the championship and never won it. That was kind of a horrifying gimmick, because I think that was when they finally just gave up. Saying, you know what, forget covering this man up. Let's make him truly scary by just taking his shirt off.
Lovely set of braces, though.
Oh, yeah, I think that's all that was holding it up. I think if it weren't for those, I think we'd all be scarred for life.
Apparently, who was I listening to? I can't remember who I was listening to, but you would never ever see Mabel or Viscera in the locker room without a pair of shorts on. You would never see him bottomless.
Maybe he was a never nude. We're going to change gears here from WWF and WWE to more WCW. Now, first of all, I'm going to preface this. Are you familiar with King Curtis Iaukea? Curtis Iaukea, of course, was a wrestler from the olden days, and I think more modern fans would know him as the master of the Dungeon of Doom. He was the one who would yell at Kevin Sullivan, "My son, Sullivan!" And they put him in like weird icicle makeup. It was really weird.
Oh, him?
Yeah.
Right, I thought you were actually talking about the guy who would become Prince
yes,
Iaukea.
Yeah, well, King Curtis Iaukea, that was that dude, and then his son,
Right, I get you.
Prince Iaukea, would go on to have a nice lengthy career in WCW as a cruiserweight, but it wasn't until about 2000 era where Vince Russo had the brilliant idea, well, bro, you're a prince, so let's make you Prince Iaukea. And so he was the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea to coincide with, at the time, Prince the musician had the artist formerly known as Prince. So he had this whole gimmick of the paisley, the purple, and the glitter and everything.
I think his theme tune was a direct rip-off of Purple Rain.
Pretty much, yeah, although the network will never hear it. But yeah, it was a very big Purple Rain ripoff. Here's the weird thing, and honestly, it was probably the best thing that happened in his career. Honestly,
It's the only thing I know.
Yeah,
other than the little skirt he used to wear.
It's what he's most remembered for, and he won a championship out of it. So I guess you can't fault him for that. It's one of the few times Vince Russo might have actually been on the hit the nail on the head with a gimmick there. But also one thing I thought was interesting about his character was they tried to make him kind of bisexual, where he would like not only feel up on the women but also the men as well, which I thought was kind of weird. It's a very interesting, creative interpretation of Prince the musician, because he was a very sexual man, but he was not bisexual. He did not go both ways. He was strictly for the ladies. I thought that was a very interesting take on the character, and maybe that was just a result of oh, that's the style of the time in wrestling where you have to be shocking, you have to do something like that to get noticed.
Prince Iaukea is very, very, very early Velveteen Dream.
You're right,
That's,
oh my god.
That's the direction Velveteen Dream was going, wasn't it?
Yeah, Velveteen Dream today is kind of the final realized version, the final form, you might say, of the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea, who then later became the artist for shorthand. If it weren't for, Tafka Prince Iaukea, then we probably wouldn't have had Velveteen Dream in its current form.
What a lineage, yeah?
This one's kind of a stretch, Ross. Work with me on this one, because in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had the debut of another royal figure in the WWF by the name of Stephanie McMahon, who would become the billion-dollar princess. It kind of works. I mean, she didn't wear a crown or a tiara, but she had the princess name.
Well, she's fantastic, isn't she? She's a heel character. You can't say that anything other than that, can you? I wish you would go back to being that, if that makes any sense. Because today it goes too far for me.
Well, she straddles the line because she's still a heel on television, but she wants to have it both ways, where because she is the brand officer and she is an ambassador for the company IRL, and she does all this good for the company, which, for better or worse, like that's what they do. They do the charities now. But she puts on this public face of being a good philanthropist, but then she goes on to television and does the evil stuff as well at times. Not so much anymore, but like when you ever see her on TV, usually when they talk about the women's evolution and all that stuff, fans do kind of mumble and grumble like, we don't want to see her on TV because she's taking all the heat from the women, which I think is a good point.
What she's doing now worked in 2000 when she was that age.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. She's a bit too old to do what she was doing back then now, if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, I think that...
Like when we know she's a mother and all this stuff that she has going on for her, but back then she had nothing.
I think what really got her over as a heel, what made her such a good heel back in the day, was the fact that she was young and she was petulant and she was trying to be the daddy's girl. If you like good heel work, I think it's fun to watch, because all Stephanie had to do was put the microphone up to her mouth and the fans would just boo and just destroy her and stuff. And I think that's very fascinating. This woman who really didn't, 3 or 4 months beforehand, didn't really have a place in the business, or really didn't have a place on TV, at least wasn't a character. And then she became only one of the most despised heels the company's ever had. And almost to a fault, because it gets to the point where she takes heat away from other wrestlers. She won a women's championship due to nefarious means. And, I think it's one of those things where we look back and we think, wow, what a great heel character.
Yeah.
But as a kid watching this, all I could do was just look at her with contempt. Staying around that time period when Stephanie McMahon was unleashed upon the world as the billion-dollar princess, we go to the 1999 King of the Ring winner, Badass Billy Gunn, Mr. Ass, B.A. Billy Gunn, call on what you will, along with King Mabel, probably one of the lower tier Kings of the Ring of all time, but I don't think it's any fault of his own.
Oh, it's one man's fault.
I'm Billy.
I can't even do that properly.
My name's Billy. It's sad because, I think if Billy Gunn had more guidance and was pushed in a certain way, I think he had the tools to be
everything.
A credible main eventer. He had it all. The theme music said he had it all.
Charisma, massive man, muscular man, great in the ring after as well.
I think the one knock against him probably was his promo. That was something that's like, if you look at the list of attributes on a video game character, like he had like physique or strength and charisma, but like promo skills was just kind of a dead last. I think Ken Shamrock's another one of those guys who won the year before in 1998, who didn't really get to fully achieve like everything he could have at the time. I think that was just due to the fact that the main event roster at the time was overinflated, or it was too full for him. With Billy Gunn, I think the time was right. He could have inserted himself as a main heel, maybe not a level of Triple H at that time, but I think he could have definitely been a contender. But yeah, when The Rock just eviscerated him, and not just in that "God, my name is Billy" prayer promo, but week after week he was dogging Billy in promos, and Billy never got his comeuppance.
Maybe that was a test then, because I think Jericho made that point. He was like, yes, I was putting this promo with The Rock on my debut, but that must have been a test to see if I could hang with the best. Yeah. Maybe Billy just bent over and said,
yeah, well,
I'm an ass man.
I'm an ass, man. You know it's bad when they acknowledge their failures and mistakes in promos, because 1 year later, or 2 years later, when Edge won the King of the Ring, his coronation speech, he says he will not Billy Gunn this reign as King of the Ring, which like it's a rare thing when WWF acknowledges their mistakes on TV. It's part of canon now that Billy Gunn was a bad King of the Ring.
It must be heartbreaking for Billy though, because that was obviously the big push of his career. He'd been through Rockabilly. Yes, he had great success with the New Age Outlaws, but that's tag team stuff. It's not the main event, is it? And he gets there, and it's over within a few months.
Yeah, but honestly, it's in a way, it's kind of helped build his legend and his mythos. Because yeah, he was one of the worst kings of the rings of all time, but everyone remembers him for being one of the worst kings of the ring of all time, and now he'll live forever because of it. The mid to late 2000s was kind of a dark period for the King of the Ring in WWE, because after Brock Lesnar won it, I believe it was in 2002, I guess they figured, well, we have no use for this anymore because no one can top what Brock Lesnar could do. So yeah, it really lay dormant for a long time. Actually, that's not true. There was King of the Ring, King Regal. He came around. And we can talk about that. Was another good example.
That was because he used it with the GM role very well.
Yes, and yeah, he was very King Lear. So we're going to put him in the good category as well. Although then he kind of cocked it up when he got suspended for 60 days for wellness violation, and that's kind of a missed opportunity there for sure. And that's a whole other video we could talk about. But then in 2010, Sheamus became the King of the Ring winner. And then, I think that alone would have been fine because Sheamus was a guy who I think was made for the main event, and he did great there as a former champion and everything. But then he took this whole king thing to a really weird level. Sheamus had his own custom kingly gear, but then he kind of looked like the Cockroach King was the best way I could describe it.
I think he looks like a character off of Vance, the film, the Disney Pixar film. Yeah, it was weird because obviously Sheamus came in and had one of the best debut years ever. Two-time WWE champion, I think he was, even though Cena fell through the table.
Yeah.
And then he got the King of the Ring, and it just stopped. The momentum stopped. He was in obviously WrestleMania with Triple H, and then he couldn't beat John Morrison.
Not only is it weird for WWE to acknowledge a mistake they make, but for them to also drop a bad gimmick almost immediately.
I think it was 3 months.
That long? I thought it was 3 weeks. It felt like 3 weeks to me for them to have him come up with the crown and the cape and everything. That was just a bizarre thing. And moving from there, two guys who are kind of intertwined in their careers are Sheamus and Wade Barrett. Because he won King of the Ring in 2015. I believe Neville was the person he beat in the finals for it.
I think it was just pushing the new network.
Yeah, exactly. It was a network exclusive thing. In fact, it's actually still on my watch list, the King of the Ring from that year. I never actually finished it all the way through. It was one of a litany of questionable to okay gimmicks for Wade Barrett over the years, and he ran with it. He did the whole he was the king, and then he aligned himself with Stardust for a bit.
No, I thought some of this was entertaining.
Yeah,
the stuff in the room with the lights and whatnot, I thought that was well done.
The Cosmic King, along with Stardust, and if they had the Ascension as like the Stooges, I think that could have been a very awesome stable, almost for all the wrong reasons.
I loved it when they popped up in the crowd and Stardust would have the telescope out, and it's just funny stuff in it. It's just.
I think it's like the Wade Barrett as King, especially as Cosmic King, almost fell into that category of Kurt being goofy with the robe and the crown, because if you embrace the silliness of it, the fact of there being a king in wrestling in 2015 or whatever, that really could have been money. But then it really sunk once Stephen Amell beat them at SummerSlam that year.
It's such a bad news Barrett, man.
I know.
That's where it went wrong. Why didn't they just let that naturally transition over to being face?
I know. Well, that's
give him the New Day treatment.
And that's a whole other ball of wax. That's a whole other conversation for another time. But yeah, I guess Bad News Bear, that came before.
Yeah, and then the King came after. Because he ended up winding up being the King still, but without dressed as the King. Then he appeared at WrestleMania 32, the night after on Raw.
Yes.
Kicked out because he was the weak link. Bad News Barrett, the weak link in a stable with Alberto Del Rio.
Well, I think he got hurt too damn much. It's seriously, I think he was saddled with goofy gimmicks, and then when he got a good gimmick, he got it over, and they punished him for it. And
then one hit after a hit after a hit. It was so heartbreaking.
That's kind of our wrap-up on just a brief history of kings in wrestling. But before we go, let's just talk about our favorite kings. We talked about the good, we talked about the bad. Now let's talk about what we like best as kings. I guess I'm going to start first, and my pick for my favorite king has to be the aforementioned Jerry Lawler. I think he did the best. I think no one could really touch him just as a performer. And now his commentary stuff, especially in the late 90s, very questionable, very icky, but I think if you just look at his body of work as a wrestler, especially in Memphis, where he really made his name, I think he did the king role proud. I mean, hardly anyone can touch him on the microphone. Even if you try and do a promo with him today, unless you're Wade Barrett, he goes, maybe next week you won't be around. But besides that, I think he's done very well for himself as a character and a performer. He's still wrestling today.
How long has he been the king? He must be about 45 years now.
Something like that. I mean, I think he's been a king longer than he's not been a king. But I think, he's going to go down to me as certainly the best king of all time, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Ross, who do you have?
I'm not going WWE. I'm not going WCW. Going straight. Well, I am going WCW technically. Jimmy the King, or Jimmy King, because he is the best wrestler, better than all the wrestler. I love that line.
That was a great line. Yeah, because there is none higher. Sucker MCs will call him sire.
I just love the fact. Oh, Oliver Platt, bless his cotton socks. him in that king getup, it just writes itself.
With his
doesn't
like Kevlar vest. And it was a bulky enough outfit that Kanye could easily slip into that role for doing the stunts and stuff,
Yeah.
and no one will be the wiser.
I will rule you. And he had an awful finisher as well, which I love. I just love awful.
It was just a top rope axe handle.
Yeah.
Was it even top rope or was it a second rope axe handle?
I think it was, middle rope.
It's amazing.
What was it? Call me Crown Me.
Yeah, crown him king.
Yeah.
Prepare to be varnished. And then, how messed up is it that of all the people in Ready to Rumble who got a tie-in and became WCW champion in real life, how did he not get that gig? It was his to win. It's like his redemption story in that movie, and David Arquette's the one who swoops right in and gets the belt. That's not
He
fair.
legitimately beats Diamond Dallas Page.
Yes.
Let's forget about Sting for a second and the swinging at the end.
Well, that's going to be our retrospective on royalty and wrestling. I'm sure we missed a few, and I'm sure you'll let us know about that in the comments section. But for Mr. Ross,
Tweddell. It is Tweddell, Adam Pacini. Tweddell.
for Ross at Cultaholic.com, I'm Brian Zane. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.